Chapter 1. Lucas Robert Fox. I'd loved him in one way or another since we were babies. I'd stupidly wanted something more with him for at least the last year. But I couldn't have him. Dean Pierce was my best friend, my brother, my ride or die, and very much straight. We'd been inseparable from the moment he moved in with his grandma next door to my mom and me. We'd been 2 years old. Dean's parents had opted to let him live with his grandma because they were too busy with work to take care of a child. Yeah, mostly a blessing, but tell me that doesn't fuck with a kid. Dean had lived his entire life making himself miserable trying to live up to his parents' expectations, and feeling even worse each time they let him know he'd failed. In truth, I despised Mr. and Mrs. Pierce, almost as much as I loved their son. And wouldn't that just send them into a panic if they ever found out? Luckily, Dean and I grew up with loving, accepting, amazing women. Grandma Tilly and my mom Lisa were great friends, which meant Dean and I were together more than we were apart. Tilly and Lisa helped each other out, supported each other, and were still great friends even today, some nearly 3 decades after we'd all been thrust together. Between them and Dean, I'd had nothing but family love and support my whole life. Maybe I didn't know my dad by anything other than a few old photographs and mom's stories of him before he went off and made a new family, but I had Mom, Tilly, and Dean. When I'd started exploring my sexuality in late high school, the 3 of them took it in stride and stood by my side. When I'd come out as bisexual, none of them blinked an eye. When I'd found myself in emotional throes over breakups, the 3 of them were there for me. Dean and I were attached to the hip all through school. Whether by luck or because our small-town school system knew we were friends and loved Tilly and Mom, we were in every single class together from kindergarten through graduation. There was no question we'd go off to college together. We spent 4 years in undergrad together, Dean in pre-med and me in hospitality. Honestly, I would have likely skipped college, but I wanted the experience with my best friend. When he started medical school, I started bartending. When he got a job on Cravenwood Block as a doctor at the health center, I took a job at Cravenwood Tap. We moved into an apartment with 6 other guys who instantly became our closest friends, and I never once let on I'd fallen in love with my best friend somewhere along the way. Each and every day was getting harder and harder to keep it to myself, to hide my feelings. But Dean was straight, and he was the other half of my whole. I could never risk our friendship just because my heart had gone and gotten all tangled up. Instead, I'd love him quietly and wish happiness for both of us. "You good?" Dean asked, his head cocked, silvery blue eyes concerned as we danced around the rooftop, a slight breeze ruffling his light brown hair. Our friends had put together a prom for Shaw, one of our roommates who'd had a shit past and missed out on his prom, and the whole experience was messing with my head. Dean and I had been dancing to the fast songs and joking around with dips and spins during the slow songs all night, while the other 3 actual couples danced in each other's arms with stars in their eyes and love in the air. When Leighton had announced the last song and asked everyone to dance, I'd yanked Dean close, our 6-foot frames colliding. For a moment, as our chests pressed together and our eyes locked, I thought he was going to back away, make a joke, laugh it off. Instead, he'd placed a hand on my waist and raised his right hand. I'd mirrored his movements, and that was how we ended up dancing to One Call Away by Charlie Puth. And my thoughts had been dancing away as well. "Yeah, I'm good." I glanced toward our friends. Jet and Leighton, the epitome of opposites attract. Jet had the whole dark and scowly thing going on most of the time, and Leighton was like a damn ray of sunshine. They'd started out as friends, and then just friends with benefits. But Jet's claim about being straight had evolved into not so straight, at least when it came to Leighton. We hadn't been there for the beginning of their relationship, but it was clear as day the 2 were madly in love. Then there were Ollie and Bash. There was quite an age gap between them. Bash had moved in right around the time Dean and I had. There was a funny story about how Ollie and Bash met. Their friendship and now relationship could have gone a very different way, but it was easy to see they were infatuated with each other. Julian and Shaw were the newest couple, and my heart smiled to watch them dance around the rooftop. Shaw was something special, and Julian was the perfect man for him. Dean and I had met Shaw just as our roommates were expanding from a group of 4 to a group of 8, and I'd immediately noticed the attraction between Julian and Shaw. Shaw had quite the shitty past, but he'd done what he needed to do to move on. It wasn't really my place to tell, but the what we'd opted to do wasn't the best part. Shaw and I had talked, and I knew he'd likely opt into it again. Maybe just with different people in charge. It was more the who he'd gotten involved with that had caused problems after he'd suffered so much throughout his childhood.